Okay, awesome. So we are here for another episode of Mind the Music, running monthly on Reform Radio, my favorite station in the UK. And today I'm going to talk to Tom, but before we dive into that conversation, I just really quickly want to let you know that if you are interested in diving deeper into wellness, artist well-being, mental well-being, all of that beautiful stuff, then I want to welcome you to join my Facebook group. It's called the Electronic Music Wellness Club. We do meditation sessions bi-weekly. We do monthly Zoom meetups. I do a lot of free trainings in there covering how to overcome procrastination, beating creative blocks, like all of that beautiful stuff that most of you struggle with and that you don't have to struggle with. And the nice thing about a community like that is that you also have peers who are in the same boat. So you don't have to feel alone with anything that you're going through as you are progressing as a DJ producer in dance music. So if you want to join that community, if you feel called, if you're like, I'd definitely be interested to dive a little bit deeper into wellness in dance music, then just head on over to Facebook, go to the search bar and just pop in Electronic Music Wellness Club, and you should be able to find my group. So for today, I have invited Tom. I will let Tom introduce himself, but kind of the reason why Tom is coming on to the show is, well, there's many things that we want to talk about, but mostly, as you know, if you've been listening to this show since the beginning, I like interviewing people that I have personal connection with and just really a lot of common ground that we can cover, and also kind of in a way showing what it actually looks like and feels like to make genuine, authentic connections in this industry, okay? It's not based on accolades, it's not based on the position that you hold, it's really that soul-led human connection, just really people finding each other, resonating with each other, and just wanting to do something beautiful together. So that's one of the reasons why Tom is here. So hello, Tom, let's just dive in. And why don't you just introduce yourself to everyone?
Hello. Okay, yeah, so as you said, I'm Tom. I DJ and produce under the name T.Bunts. I'm currently based in Sheffield in England. Grew up on the outskirts of London, place near Reading. Been DJing for about 11 years, producing for on and off for maybe 7. And yeah, I've DJed across a lot of the UK, out in Ibiza, played Amnesia Ibiza a few times, Printworks in London, Ministry of Sound in London. And yeah, I guess that's me as an artist. And I'm sure we'll get into the How to Dance Sober stuff shortly.
Yes, well, why don't you, introduce that as well? Like, what is How to Dance Sober? Why did you get started with that? Like, go ahead and just dive in.
Sure. So 3 years ago next month, I stopped drinking. Before that, I was, I guess, a typical like binge drinker, being into nightlife and club culture. And that just kind of comes hand in hand, doesn't it? So I'd be out a lot, I'd be drinking at these events and taking drugs at these events. And then it just kind of got to a point in my life where I thought that's not really for me anymore and cut it out. I make it sound super duper easy and simple there. Like it had taken a few attempts, admittedly, but it got to a point where I just thought, right, this is definitely not for me anymore, and stopped it. And then I kind of, as I went on my own journey throughout that, continued being as involved as I possibly could in dance music because I love it and that's my like passion in life. That's what I do, and I'm never going to move away from that. So I started kind of learning to navigate the industry sober, and a lot of people find it really weird. There's so many people when I would either introduce myself or I'd find other people introducing me for me, saying Tom is a DJ and he's sober, and they'd be like, what? Look at me like I'm an alien, and it was just weird, or people just saw it as weird. So I kind of had the idea of what could I do to kind of change this, and then the idea of what I called How to Dance Sober came around. With the aim of what I say is rebranding sobriety.
Yeah, I really love that, like that kind of tagline or whatever you want to call it, because I really do feel like that's a mission, like that's your mission, right?
Yeah.
Like, it is a mission that is needed.
Exactly.
Because, It's just, as you said, most people find it so weird. So yeah, why don't you dive a little bit deeper into that, like rebranding sobriety in dance music? What does that look like?
Well, there's a bit of, I don't know if stigma is the right word, but there's kind of, I guess, a stereotype around the word sober and a sober person and boring. And people think that sober people don't go clubbing, they don't go out to raves, they don't go to festivals, they don't like have it out when they go on a night out. And it's just so wrong. If you know somebody who's sober that does that, then that's, you can't just tar them all with the same brush, especially in dance music. And one thing that I remember before I'd launched it, and I was just, I think I was just doing the Clubhouse rooms before I'd launched the podcast, that is. And I was in a music one with a bunch of like fairly well-known DJs in the kind of underground house scene, I guess. And the topical conversation was what can you do that others maybe aren't to excel in your career or get to the next step in your career. So people coming in with different options, like, oh, I quit watching Netflix so I could produce, or one guy said he moved to a new town because he realized the mates he got in with, they just got out and got smashed all the time and weren't really working towards anything. So it was just party and nothing else. So he moved himself away from them. So I had my input on that conversation, and my idea, or what I brought to the table, was I stopped drinking. And one DJ who I won't name him, but is fairly well known, he said, sort of came back to me, he was like, yeah. And I was talking about being at events and being switched on, you know, who to speak to, you know, when to shut up, you know, when to leave, you're not like too close to anyone, like, you know what I mean, not invading personal space, you're switched on and you can just go and network at events, which is obviously a massive part of the music industry. And he said to me, yeah, but don't be too sober though. And it pissed me off, put it that way. But anyway, I just kind of brushed over it. But it just made me really think afterwards, this is what I need to get rid of, and this is what I'm aiming to just squash. But what does too sober mean? What he means is don't be boring. And it's just such a narrow-minded, well, I say narrow-minded, I probably would have had that view at one point. In fact, I definitely would have had that view at one point. So it's not me going out and saying, everybody thinks that's an idiot. It's just they're at a different stage of, well, it may not even be a sober journey for them. It's just learning to accept it in the industry. And like I say, that is the rebrand sobriety hashtag that I'm trying to push, in that it's not what it's got the reputation for. Yeah. And I think with it goes way beyond dance music, the role of alcohol in society in general. It's just, it's the vast majority of us drink it on a regular basis. And it's so like super hyper normalized in almost every culture, isn't it? When you're of age, you drink. Like, whether that's with a meal or whether that's going out or whether you're celebrating or whether you're like drowning sorrows. It's almost like we're brought up to think it's the answer to everything. So when someone says, I don't drink, people either A, they think you're weird, or B, they think you're like a recovering alcoholic. Yes. Which is, I've said, I've never identified as someone who was an alcoholic, although it's a very weird word, and you can debate to the end of the earth what an alcoholic is. I was somebody, I guess I was using an addictive substance called alcohol on a regular basis, and I decided to stop doing it. If you want to call that an alcoholic, that's fine. But yeah, I'm not on the journey of recovery. It's nothing like that. I very rarely, if I didn't start House of Dance sober, I would never think about alcohol. It's just something that I don't consume. And so I only kind of think about it or notice it kind of when there's, I don't know, scenes in the telly and stuff like that, where I look at them differently, or adverts or certain situations where there's obviously drinking happening, you can't escape it. So you're going to notice it and I guess then think about it to an extent, but it's not something that I think, oh, I'm like counting days to try and get to a certain milestone sober or anything like that. So yeah, I guess that I would say in a nutshell, it's quite long-winded, is the whole rebrand sobriety idea. Yeah.
So what I like about what you said, well, I like a lot about what you said, but what I kind of wanted to dive a little bit deeper into is what you said around, almost a narrow-mindedness of people. The way I've come to see that is And that also goes with the work that I do, really advocating for cultivating wellness in dance music, is what I want to do with my company is really help shape the dance music community into a more healthy, more inclusive, and more positive environment for everybody who wants to build a life around their passion for electronic music. And what that looks like for me is helping to change that collective consciousness in dance music. And what that means is really debunking and actually smashing some of those limiting beliefs and limiting stories and general stories that people tell. And one of them being, when you're not drinking, you must be boring, because there's like this whole lifestyle surrounding, being a DJ or doing live gigs or being a producer or even any other role in nightlife, like working as a sound person or whatever that looks like in nightlife. Like alcohol automatically comes into the mix, and there's this limiting story around that being, oh, that's just normal. And when you're not part of that story, then that's not normal and you must be boring. So that's kind of like what I see as one of the limiting collective beliefs that I feel like you're debunking with How to Dance Sober and with Rebranding Sobriety, because that's really what happens when people enter a sector like the dance music industry. That's what we're talking about, but it really goes for anything, if you ask me, is that they tend to make those stories that they hear their own. They internalize them, they make them mean something about them, but they don't really think about what does that actually mean. They just kind of, I don't know, they hear a mentor say it or somebody that they look up to or a peer, and they just kind of adopt that behavior without really thinking about it. And I think what you're doing and what I'm doing with my business is a lot of it is raising awareness and really helping people to think for themselves and think about, in this case, what does alcohol mean to you? What is your relationship with alcohol like? And is it really necessary to have that kind of relationship? That's kind of how I see all of that. And for me, like finding your clubhouse room, I think back in February, I think you asked me to come and speak in your room. And then I was only like 1 month into my sobriety. Now it's almost 7 months, but your room, like being invited in that room and discovering that vibe that was there and what you were doing in such a non-pressured, informative kind of way is really something that helped me in my sobriety journey. And even my fiance's, this, like I took him to one of your rooms, he's also, doing the sober thing right now as well. Nice. And so that room has helped me and also him to feel like, hey, actually what we're going through is normal and it's okay. And there are certain questions that we have, and it's not easy to deal with the reactions of your environment because you are getting like these really weird comments. Like, for example, for me, it was like, oh my God, I could never do that. Or, oh my God, drinking is a lifestyle. Like, whereas I would be like, I'm just communicating to you a lifestyle choice that I have made, which I don't see how that impacts your life. But those were the things that you and your community and your space has helped me navigate. And I'm sure other people as well. And I'm kind of going off the grid here. I'm just kind of blurting stuff out. But I feel like a lot of what you have been doing so far that I have seen is definitely helping reshape those limiting stories that people have around alcohol in dance music and helping them reframe their relationship, whether that means they stop drinking, whether that means they are sober curious or they cut back, whatever that looks like, it doesn't really matter. Like, you're never going to tell them what to do or how to be, but it helps people really rethink their relationship with alcohol, I feel.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's kind of the main goal of the How to Dance Sober podcast and the whole kind of message is I'm not, and this is what I say to my guests before I have them on the podcast. I say, look, I'm not trying to get everyone to go sober. I'm just trying to change people's perspective and hopefully change people's relationship or the way they see their drinking. And by doing that, and by having the podcast that isn't just from start to finish talking about or demonizing alcohol, we chat about like roughly half is just about music and about DJing and events and nightlife and just like nothing to do with sobriety. And then it kind of goes on to how long they've been sober and why they're sober and how they found it and how their friends have accepted it and stuff like that. And I just hope by each guest has a different story and a different reason for doing it. And obviously they've been sober for different amounts of time. Some are quite new to it. Some have been doing it like 10 plus years. In fact, I've got one guy that's never drunk, a DJ that's never drunk in his life. Well, he tried it when he was growing up and didn't like it, so never drunk, which I think is absolutely fascinating. It takes so much strength of character to not just start drinking like everyone else does around you, right? So yeah, it's about, because the thing about dance music, it takes a lot to stop drinking because you're surrounded by it. It doesn't seem like a problem when everyone else is doing it. And like for my situation, all my mates did it. We all just went out, got smashed, we got on it, and then we'd go to work on Monday. We'd feel like crap for a couple of days. We'd hold a job down. It wasn't like I was surrounded by people that were like wrecking relationships, losing homes, or like anything like that, which some people, I think, that's their view of when something becomes a problem and it needs to get to that stage before they maybe consider removing it from their life. And for me, it wasn't that I felt it was going in that direction. It was just that it just didn't sit right with who I was as a person. I've always been a really health conscious person. I've always ate what I considered to be a healthy diet. I've always exercised and I've always really looked after myself. Yet I say that, yet for years, I was going out and getting absolutely smashed for the weekends, missing night's sleep and taking days to recover. And I was never one of these people, I don't know how true it is, but these people that say, oh, I don't get hangovers or the come downs are never that bad. And I'm just there like dying for days afterwards. And they've been at the same event until the same time. And it would really knock my routine. And I always said, what I've learned about myself is I'm just a sucker for routine. I love having a routine, and it's quite a big deal for me to change my routine. But what I have learned is when I do it and I know it's for the better, it gets me out of my comfort zone. But when I eventually get used to it, it's just my routine, and then it's so easy for me to keep routine. So when I used to do stuff like going out and just going way too hard at the weekend and then not going to the gym Monday, Tuesday, and maybe not even Wednesday, it would just mess with my head, and I'd just be like, just like I'd beat myself up quite bad about it.
Yeah.
And then I just started to realize, like, what do I get out of this? It's not like I can't go to these events sober. There was no need for me after that event to go stand in someone's kitchen for 12 hours.
Oh my God,
what did I get from it? Nothing except a militant hangover or a come down that lasted for a few days. And I knew full well I could go to events sober because I used to do it because I was the designated driver so often when I lived near Reading in a place called Wokingham. We used to drive to Fabric all the time. Well, I say I was very often the designated driver, just because if it didn't drive, waiting for the train or trying to get the first train back or get a taxi or something the next day, it was just so expensive. And it's just, I just remember so many times being like waiting for the first train or end up paying through my nose for a taxi back from London or something like that. And just thinking, oh God, I'll do anything just to get in my bed now. And so yeah, I just drove, and I knew if I was driving to an event, there was never a temptation to drink at all, obviously. And I just always used to reflect on these events. And this actually happened years before I ever really considered going sober. But I used to drive to some events and then I'd not drive to some events. And then I remember comparing them in my head afterwards and noting that never once did I drive to an event and regret it. I never woke up the next day, or I never got halfway through the night and I thought, oh, I wish I was drinking now. It never, not once happened. But so many times where I either just went and drunk, or I nearly drove. I was going to drive, and then last minute, I was like, oh, sod it, no, I'm going to have a drink. I always regret it. So it just, I kind of look back on that as a long time before I actually went sober. But it's just a very telling comparison that if you're going to the right events, you're not going there to get smashed. You're going there to see DJs, to spend time with people that you enjoy the company of. And it sounds really cliche saying you don't need alcohol to have fun. And if someone said that to me years ago, I would have rolled my eyes so bad. And so many people will probably roll their eyes when they hear it. So I do try to kind of, I try not to say that you don't need alcohol to have fun kind of thing. But I look back and I just think I was having amazing times at these events because the venues are amazing and the lineups are amazing. The DJs were playing amazing sets, not because I was smashed. I just happened to be getting smashed at those events. So as soon as I kind of disconnected those two things, it was so freeing. And I just, like, there was never like, oh, I don't enjoy the events in the same way. It's nothing like that. I guess kind of have to not relearn, but just get used to experiencing the events in a slightly different way. But as soon as that happens, it takes a little time, but as soon as that kind of clicks, it's so empowering. And I just, I love it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, because I feel a lot of it is deconditioning yourself, especially with alcohol. Like for me personally, alcohol had been, up until January 1st this year, had been a part of my life since I was 12, and I'm 37 now. So it's like, wow, that's a long time. Yeah. That's a long relationship to leave. And I feel like, I think for me, the same thing kind of sort of happens in a way where I was thinking about, like, you know, what is alcohol bringing to my life, and more thinking about, like, why am I doing this, way before I even stopped drinking. And for me, the thing that kind of started it was, as a coach, I would never drink or do other drugs when I was having coaching clients. So let's say it's Saturday and I know, like, on Wednesday, Thursday, I have a coaching client. Like, I'm just not going to do anything, because I don't want anything in my system. I just don't think that would be fair. I wouldn't be fully present for this person. I wouldn't be fully present for me. I wouldn't be really be able to give all of me, because you're still kind of recuperating from that weekend. And so that's kind of where it started. And then I started to really notice what that was doing for me, especially anxiety. That was a big one for me. Like the anxiety that alcohol was bringing to my life is, like, I cannot even believe now, just 7 months in, how incredible that was. Like, how did I even manage to get through some days, like, with all of that anxiety flying around day in and day out? And alcohol definitely was just a huge fuel for that anxiety.
And I think you're so right. It is, and it is for so many people, but so few people, I think, actually make the link, because in a really short term, alcohol alleviates that anxiety for a very short period of time, only to then increase it. So what it's very hard for your brain to work out is that alcohol is causing so much of that anxiety, because your subconscious is being told every time you have that drink, you feel a bit more relaxed, because it's a numbing agent, and it like on a chemical level depresses you. So you feel calm, you feel relaxed. These little problems or the anxiety, it goes away for a very short period of time. The only issue is when that alcohol kind of starts to wear off, you're either going to be left with even more, or you just have another drink and then it keeps doing it and keeps doing it. So it's not until you really stop for, like you're saying there, an extended period of time, that you really start to notice how it's just like, it tricks you on so many levels that you just never realize until you just take it away and stop giving it, like, the power that you only give it through drinking. Yeah,
and take it away for longer than a month, because that's really not enough. And I felt like, for me, 3 months in, I started to realize, okay, now I'm starting to feel the true effects. And now I'm 7 months in, and I'm like, oh my God, now I'm starting to feel like, the longer I'm in it, the more and more I realize. And I also think it's normal, because, again, as I said, such a long relationship with alcohol, I really want to give myself enough time to experience my life without. And I still have, I hope, a long life to live. So much to look forward to. But I feel like it's just, as you said, like, not enough people think about what it's actually doing. And if you do start talking about that, a lot of people get quite defensive and get quite, yeah, I think defensive is the best way I can put it. They feel like they have to kind of, you know, come up with all of these explanations and reasons as to why they can handle it and it's not really affecting them. And I'm like, don't fool yourself, because in the end of the day, as you said as well, it's also a chemical reaction. It's not like you can tell your brain like, oh, we're not going to have that chemical reaction right now. Like it's your body, it's biology, it's just happening. Like even on just a rational level, you cannot fool yourself into thinking that this is not going to affect you, because it is, because you're just slowly poisoning yourself, basically, your body, and also your mental state and all of that. So yeah,
people I find quite often, without me asking, so because I don't bring it up, it's, and especially not in certain situations, like it comes up a lot around certain friends for obvious reasons, but some situations I just think, well, I'm not going to mention it. I like, it's irrelevant whether, but obviously people notice, well, I say obviously, a lot of times in certain situations, people notice if you're ordering soft drinks or whatever. So they'll ask you about it. And then so often it switches to people, not, it sounds very, like you say, very defensive, but sort of justifying, oh, yeah, here's the reasons I drink and here's the reasons I have not stopped. And you just think, okay, that's fine. I haven't asked you about any of those reasons. Yeah. But it can be a little, not threatening, but because I look back, so I always try to look back onto when I was a drinker, what would I have done if someone had said that? And I remember being around people that weren't drinking, even if they weren't drinking for the night. And if they were in the circle that I was out with that night, I would push drink onto them. And when I look back, why did I do that? It's because it's all about me. I wanted to let go. And I felt like I couldn't fully let go if someone around me was sober. I wanted everyone to be on at least the same level I was. Yeah. So I pushed drink onto other people. Now they almost cringe saying it, because I obviously stand for everything against that now, but I have to kind of look back and think, why did I do that? And accept the fact that people around me are probably going to do that. It definitely doesn't happen to anyone I know, because they know I'm sober. Like we'll joke about it and whatnot. Like we're going to Fabric reopening this weekend, and there's been jokes about just me getting stuff in for Fabric and stuff, like, and they all just laugh, obviously, because not because I'm hilarious, but just because they know that that's not going to happen, you know. But to start off with, there was more people, I guess, that would question it and push back. But what I really like now is I can say, yeah, I've actually got a podcast all about it, and now they must be like, oh, it's obviously pretty serious then. So I can kind of squash that, people that might think it's a phase or something.
Yeah, right. I think for me, what also helped, well, obviously as a coach, there's a lot of tools that I can like go to and, you know, to kind of cope with, like, put yourself out of the situation and just kind of look at what is actually happening, describe the situation. Like when people feel like they have to defend themselves or justify themselves, like it's really easy for me to take a step back. But what really helped me, and I already mentioned this, was being able to go into your clubhouse rooms and just kind of listen to what you were all talking about and just kind of asking questions around that and just understanding like, oh, it's actually quite normal for this to happen. It's actually quite normal for people to maybe not come across as being very supportive, even if they mean well. Sometimes in the things that they're saying, it's just more about them than it is about you. And in the end of the day, you do have, whether you want it or not, you do have an impact. Like for me, for example, my fiance stopped drinking 3 months ago now, I think, because of seeing me. Yeah, because of seeing me, you know, still having fun and not boring, and still going out and just being like la la la. So that's really cool. And then other friends of mine have also become more curious, you know, like asking me questions, seeing me do this thing, like as you said, like it's no longer a phase, like this is just a thing now. And I didn't announce it. I didn't like make a firm decision, January 1st I will stop drinking for the rest of my life. No, I just kind of quit. And then we're like July and I'm not drinking. So it's like, yeah, it definitely does have an impact. And I think for anybody listening who's considering this or who's already in it, just know that whether you want it or not, you do have an impact, which in any way you want to turn it is positive, but you're not responsible for how other people feel or react to that. That's not your responsibility. Your only responsibility is how you feel about your own stuff and how you respond to those situations, but you're not responsible for how people feel about your decisions. And I think that's really a big one, especially for people who just are in their journey, like who are new on their journey. It's really important to know that, I think.
That is a huge part of it. And I distinctly remember that being a big part of it for me, because before I quit, well, let's say before I had my last drink, because I know there was times before that where I quit, in quote marks, quit for anyone that's listening. And I would start again, but looking back on it, they weren't, the reasons I started again were not for me. They were for either for other people, or I guess to me to some extent, because they were like, one of them, what I distinctly remember was Christmas Eve. I'd not drunk for an extended period, or I say probably maybe 2 months. And I was comfortable. I remember being really comfortable not drinking. I wasn't like struggling or anything like that, but Christmas Eve was coming up and I thought, I always get smashed on Christmas Eve and I always have a hangover on Christmas Day, which is a horrible thought. Yet somehow it was enough to make me drink again. And that cycle kind of happened 2, maybe 3 times. And then the final time I just thought, right, I'm going to be selfish. And sometimes it's not a bad thing to be selfish, especially if you're doing something that is going to better you as a person, improve everything about you, is how I'd say it. Now, I just knew that I had to be selfish about this decision and completely ignore how it would affect anybody else. Now, some people, like you say, they either question it or there's a bit of resistance or they push back against it. But if anyone's doing that long term, they're not the sort of people that you need around you in your life. I look back at it and I think, have I lost any friends over it? No, I don't. There's people I spend less time with, but real friends don't. Okay, they're going to give you banter. I would have always given banter if someone had stopped drinking back when I was a drinker. That's part of it. That's what your mates do. They take the piss out of you.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. You need to learn to deal with that. But as soon as they realize it's a decision for you and it's a decision for the betterment of you as a person, they're going to accept that if they're real mates, because anyone would accept some decision your friend made purely to better themselves. So it's just getting through that phase stage, which, because I remember thinking, I wonder if I'll ever look back and think, oh, do you remember that sober phase I had? Because I was thinking, like, right now, I'm very aware that my mindset on certain things throughout my life has changed drastically. And one of those being alcohol. So I'm very conscious of that fact. And there was a time where I was as sure that I would never quit drinking as I am now, that I will never drink again. So I'm always conscious that could kind of be flipped on its head. Now, I will sit here and tell you, as a matter of fact, I will never drink again. But I also would have said, I'll never quit alcohol many years ago. Yeah. So it's being conscious of that fact and learning to get through the phase stage. And really, everyone that matters in your life, I guarantee you will accept it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, again, reiterating what we've said before, if they are really true friends or just genuinely supportive of you, they will stick around. If not, then they'll just kind of phase out. You're not responsible for how they feel around your decisions. And as you also said, it's definitely okay to be selfish around that. Like, if you need to maybe spend a little bit of time away from certain people as you are figuring this journey out, that's totally fine. That's totally fine. Like, there is no reason even to justify any of that. Like, if you need that, then you just do that. If that's what your energy needs to kind of regroup and figure all of this new stuff out, then that's totally fine. And the way that this will go maybe mostly for women or female identifying people listening, but the way that I explained it to one friend of mine who seemed to be having the most issues with me not drinking anymore was like, if you would come up to me and tell me, oh, I'm pregnant, I would never ever say, oh my God, I would never do that. Oh my God, that's totally not for me. I would never say that. I would just be like, I'm happy for you, good for you, and that's it, right? So for me, it was literally that whole thinking around it, like it's a lifestyle, it's a choice that you make. It doesn't have anything to do with you. I'm just kind of communicating to you that this from now on is something that I've decided. I'm proud of it. It makes me feel happy. And it could be stop drinking. It could be getting pregnant. It could be whatever. You choose your life to be, and you get to choose that. You get to decide what you want your life to look like, and you get to be supported for that. But you don't, in essence, you don't need the approval of others to be valuable enough to choose your own life. And that's the thing I think you also need to remember when people are feeling a little bit off with your decision. Just remember that you don't need validation from others to do that. And I think that's also a huge one.
Completely agree with everything you just said. I think there's some very good quotes in there. I love the analogy with the with someone getting pregnant.
Yeah, because like I don't want children. I've decided that not so long ago, I think. Well, me and my fiance decided that. And also that also gets a little bit of pushback sometimes from people, obviously, because most people like think, oh, you're a woman, you will have children. But no, that's just not what I see my life to be like. But it's literally the same for me. It's just a lifestyle choice, right? So it's the same with not drinking, not doing any other drugs, not eating meat, not whatever that looks like. You just get to choose your lifestyle. And that's just really, in essence, what it's about. I just feel like with alcohol, it's probably this huge thing because it's so integrated into our lives, especially in the dance music industry. It's such a huge part of it, getting pats on the back for being like super drunk, hangover the day after, being a weekend warrior, whatever, like needing a drink or two to be able to be in the DJ booth so that your hands will not tremble, so that you will actually be able to operate the knobs. Like all of that stuff happens. But it doesn't make you a hero or anything if that is something that's not feeling good to you. So you really get to choose what you want your life to be like. So that's kind of what I wanted to say to wrap up this conversation. But lastly, Tom, what I want to ask from you is like your maybe top 2 or 3 tips for people who are looking to go on their own journey of sobriety in dance music. What would be your top 2 or 3 tips be?
So my top tip, and I'll say this because it worked for me. Now I know what works for different people is it varies from person to person. I appreciate that. But what really worked for me is learning about alcohol, the chemical, and what it does to humans. Not what it does to me because I'm me, what it does to human beings, how they process alcohol and how it impacts every part of your body and your mental state and your well-being.
Yeah.
And the more I learned about alcohol, and the book I read is called Alcohol Explained by William Porter. And it's a really matter of fact, like well laid out, all in layman's terms, book about alcohol, hence the name. And it just really just laid it out to me in a way that I just thought, Christ, why on earth would I ever want to pour alcohol down my throat ever again? Like it just laid it out so well. I distinctly remember, I say read it, I was listening to it as an audiobook, and I distinctly remember being stood in the gym listening to it, and I just stopped, and I remember having to like lift my jaw up because I was just stood there, like I can't remember what it was. And after I finished the book I'm reading now, I'm going to reread it because I read it when I first stopped, so nearly 3 years ago. So I'm going to reread that. But I mean, that tip over and above, because it just worked for me so well, is learning about alcohol, not learning why to quit or which you should do as well. But I'm just saying this one particular thing about learning about alcohol, the chemical, and what it does to your mindset and the human body is the number one thing that just not only made me want to quit, but made it super easy to quit. Because once I knew that, I was like, why would I? Yeah, exactly. Why would I ever go back?
Yeah.
So that, I mean, is just generalized to anyone, whether in the dance music industry or not, of course. But in terms of being in the dance music industry, or if you're just a rave or whatever it is, if you love dance music, a huge part of that obviously is going out to clubs and festivals and events. So really sitting back and thinking what it is you like about those events, why you go to certain events, and not rushing into going to just any old event when you are sober. So say if you are someone that's made the decision to cut it off completely, or if you're just slowly maybe moving towards that and drinking less and less, I would say doing your first sober event is a really big step, but pick what you don't go to an average event that you might get bored at.
Yeah.
If you can drive, but pick a really good event and go there and just immerse yourself in the music that you've gone to listen to and you love, and just enjoy it. There's no better buzz than experiencing an event sober and just having it stick with you the next day. You get up the next day, you feel fresh, or maybe a little tired because you've been out till whatever time, but you can function and you can remember the night before, and it just sticks with you in such a vivid way. So picking that event and thinking, if you love the music, you probably listen to it all week anyway. You're not pissed when you're listening to house or techno or drum and bass or whatever it is at home, and you still love it. So who's to say you're not going to love it when you're listening to it on a massive sound system in front of a DJ surrounded by people that are loving it as well? So yeah, picking the right event and thinking most people are going to be smashed. Nobody cares what you're doing. Nobody looks at you and thinks he's sober, she's sober. Nobody can tell. So just get stuck in. So the more you get stuck in, the better it feels, and the less people are ever going to think you're sober. Because that, for me, to start off with, and I think for a lot of people, I get, people will like, no, I'm sober. No, they won't. No, they won't. They will if you stood there like a board in the dance floor.
Yeah, true that.
But yeah, getting stuck in the right event is just a huge step.
Yeah,
I encourage anyone to do it.
Yeah, I love those tips. I think those are really, really good. And I would also say my personal tip would be find yourself a Tom.
Yeah, well, my DMs are always open. I always encourage people on every one of my podcasts. Everyone I remember, I say just DM me. So at How to Dance Sober, if I could just plug that. Just
for sure.
And I've had quite a few messages from people, which is so, I get so like, I'm so proud to have made this thing that is helping people kind of that are on a similar journey to me, because so many of them have messaged me and said, this is what I've been looking for. Like, this thing didn't exist. Because when you first get sober and you start looking online for maybe podcasts or communities and stuff, this is not to knock existing communities in any way, because they have their place and they're supportive to hundreds of thousands of people around the world. But a lot of it, none of it relates to me, put it that way. None of it relates to me. So my vision from the start is there's got to be a lot of people in my shoes that, or maybe at a slightly earlier stage in the journey or further along, who knows, but people that could benefit from these discussions that I'm having and putting out, and just stuff that I'm posting online. So yeah, it's great to speak to people that are kind of just starting out on the journey, or like you say, are sober curious.
Yeah, no, for sure. And also I feel like for me, I was happy to have found How to Dance Sober, because for me, the first thing that I did was look into like these online AA Zoom meetings, but I was like, oh, that just doesn't feel good to me. Like, I don't have anything against that, but it didn't really resonate with what I needed. And then when I found How to Dance Sober, I was like, yeah, okay, that feels good. Like, that's something that's more close to home or something for me, right? Like, you're kind of in the same environment, so you know what you're talking about. I know we had really fun conversations in the clubhouse rooms as well, just really candid, open, transparent conversations where, you know, we're talking about life beyond dance music, obviously, but the impact that all of your choices have on your life in general are just really huge. You know, I remember this one conversation around somebody was saying like, oh, I had no issue putting like 100 quid on the table for another bag of Coke, but then the day after paying for my piano lessons to better myself as a producer or whatever. Remember? I think that was Mari or something from Malta.
Yeah.
And she said, like, when I started to think about that, I was like, what the actual fuck? Like, really? I wouldn't pay, I think it was 75 euro for piano lessons, but like 100 quid for another bag of Coke. Oh yeah, sure, no problem. You know, but like that, those are the things that you go through when you are really deep into the dance music scene. Like, that just happens. Like, let's be honest, right? But you really start rethinking your decisions as they impact your life, like the investments that you make, not just money-wise, also energy, focus, attention, time. But those are things that you start realizing, like, what the fuck am I doing?
Yeah. And you mentioned it there, time. For me, that is one of the, if not the biggest benefit is, and it's not something that I necessarily appreciated to the extent that I love it now. It's just all the time I have that I didn't have before.
Yeah.
So putting aside the last 18 months where most of us have had nothing but time,
Yeah.
is being able to just go out to the events, pick and choose the events, but then have the next day and just, it was not only the time, but it was being productive in that time and getting so much more done in such less time, not waiting months and months to finish a track, because every time I go to it, I'm hungover and I only last half an hour and whatever.
Yeah.
It's just this abundance of time that you then have, and you can use that time, you can allot that time, and you can commit to time because you know you're not going to be hungover. That putting off things or canceling things last minute used to just, I did it, but I used to feel really bad for it. And I used to hate that I did it, but it happened because I'd either still be up or I'd be hungover or I'd still be asleep or whatever. And that is now knowing, oh, I'm going to an event on Friday night. Yeah, I can still make whatever plans I'm going to make the next day, whether it's lunch, breakfast with someone, whatever it is. I can go out comfortable and confident in the fact that I'm going to make that the next day and I'm going to enjoy it. I'm not going to be dragging like my half drunk body to a meeting or something.
Oh my God, yeah. And that's the thing, right? Like, time is our most important resource. It's not infinite, it's not renewable. It's just, when it's gone, it's gone. Like with money, you can still think, okay, money always comes back, or, you know, I can still see that friend some other day, or I will make new friends, like whatever. But your time, when it's gone, it's gone. Like, it's not a renewable resource. It's just lost. And that's the thing also in the cycle, when you start beating yourself up for missing family time or not being able to finish your music because you're just feeling too shitty, you know, and then beating yourself up over that. And then the next time, you know, the weekend rolls around, you're kind of already, I think, subconsciously anticipating on that. And then what you will start doing is maybe drinking even more, because you're already starting to suppress the feelings that you will feel after the thing is done. And it's like this whole cycle of like anxiety, beating yourself up, shame, like feeling sorry for yourself, feeling guilty, like all of that. And then it adds on to the pressure, like now I have to be even more doing my best because I've been making really bad decisions for myself. And it's like this whole cycle. Like, we could talk about this endlessly, but that's just the whole thing, that where the awareness needs to be built. But if you don't see, I feel like if you don't see for yourself how much you actually have suffered through this, if you have not suffered enough, it's probably going to be really difficult for you to stick to your decision to quit something like alcohol.
Yeah, interesting you say that. A lot of people, I think, they get to a really low point, and the word rock bottom is thrown around quite a lot. They say that they just obviously went through hell, yet it was such an easy decision for them to stop drinking. Now, for me, it was I knew I wanted to do it, but it became easy when I knew enough about it. I really understood it. But yeah, there were times where, because I remember thinking to myself once when I was hungover, I was thinking, right, and this was before I ever really looked into like reading up on it, read any books on it, because the books are the ones that like switch something in my brain that it just clicked.
Yeah.
Before that, I remember thinking, I'm going to stop drinking. I'm just going to do it because I'm not producing today. I remember being like out on nights out and seeing an amazing set. Do you know what? I think it was Fabric. And I remember setting an alarm the next day. I was like, I'm so inspired to set my alarm to produce. And that just obviously did not go up because I got hammered. When you're hammered, you don't think you're going to be that hungover. I used to convince myself that I'd be all right the next day, and I never was. So at least now I know.
Lies, it's all lies.
At least now I know I can absorb all the inspiration when I'm out and actually put it to good use the next day.
Yeah. And I think lastly, what I want to say is, and this is usually a difficult question for a lot of people, but this is a question that I always ask my clients or people learning from me, like within my community, within my courses and programs, is whenever you find something difficult to quit, let's say alcohol, you want to ask yourself, what are you getting from it? And a lot of people say like, what do you mean? Of course, alcohol is bad. I'm not getting anything from it. But the fact that you're still doing it means that you're still getting something from it. You're still somehow getting some sort of a quote unquote benefit from it, even if it's bad, even if it's negative, even if you kind of know it, somehow you still get something from it. Otherwise, you would decide to flip it over and you would see the benefits on the other side are much higher than what you're doing now. But oftentimes that's really what it boils down to, is what are you still getting from that somehow? And it's not always a positive thing, but there is somehow some sort of a payoff that you're getting. Otherwise you would turn it around. And I feel like that's definitely a question we can leave everybody with. They can just kind of chew on that one. But Tom, lastly, before I'm going to stop this recording, where can people find you? I know you already mentioned it on Instagram, but How to Dance Sober, where can everybody find the socials and the podcast?
Sure. So yeah, like I said, at How to Dance Sober on Instagram. And then there's a link there to the podcast itself on any platform. It's on Apple Music, Spotify, any platform really, or if you just search there, How to Dance Sober.
Awesome.
And then me, so I'm on Instagram at T.Bunts, that's T.Bunts, and then SoundCloud is the only thing else worth following, I think, that I update, and that's SoundCloud/TBunts.
Okay.
And yeah, like I say, the How to Dance Sober Instagram is somewhere I encourage anyone to just DM if they've got questions, if they're curious, if they've got, I don't know, a milestone. I've said in my last episode, which went out today, actually, I want to start celebrating people's milestones.
Yeah.
So anyone that kind of messages or posts anything on the page that they've got a milestone, I'll just shout them out in the next episode and hopefully help people on their journey.
Yes, awesome. Thank you so much, Tom. I really enjoyed this conversation. I feel like we could go on for hours and hours. Maybe we have to schedule just like a follow-up episode or something.
Let's do it. Yeah, definitely. I've enjoyed this.
Awesome.
It's nice to be on the other side because I've been interviewing people for my podcast lately. So it's kind of nice to just have a chat with you. It's been really enjoyable.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate your time and your insights and just your support. Like, to me personally, it's been really great. So thank you so much.
You're most welcome. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I'm really glad that you've hit, 7 months is it now?
Yeah, it's 7.
Brilliant. Well, congratulations.
Thank you. So happy.
So you should be.
Awesome.